all your school rugby, all in one place. This is NextGenXV.
Hello and welcome to episode 9, I think we're at now, with the NextGenXV Podcast. Dan Richards alongside me as ever. Dan, how are you getting on?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. Most schools back after half term now, so some big games this weekend to look forward to, particularly the next few weeks. So yeah, keen to get talking about it, and certainly with the wingers in that team of the decade, there's going to be a huge amount to talk about there. Yeah, so yeah, keen to get stuck in.
Yeah, it turns out there's an awful lot of wingers. It's going to be a hell of a debate trying to settle on two of those, and we're basically doing that one live because we've not really prepped the wingers, so it's going to be exciting. Before we get into all that, though, just a bit of housekeeping. You can catch us on Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And you can get in touch with us on @NextGen15, and that's going to be really important in the coming weeks because, of course, we've got our top 5 every week, and we've got some huge games coming up, including a number of live streams actually here on NextGen15, starting on Saturday with Bryanston against Camford. Then on Monday, a rare Monday game, Kings Worcester v RGS Worcester, the Modus Cup from Six Ways. Nice to have some rugby getting played at Six Ways. But before we get into all of that, a good news story. Cardinal Newman v the Judd. I'm told it's back on. Cardinal Newman win their appeal. The Schools Cup goes on. We don't get a lot of good news stories. It's nice to have one.
Yeah, amazing. Look, you probably know more than me on this one. I know very little of the ins and outs. I think it's become fairly clear we're both big advocates of stronger rugby in the statesville sector. Cardinal Newman's trying to push that. Judd, also in our top 5, states of the half term. Cardinal Newman, maybe we'll feel a bit aggrieved to not have been in that list. That'll be a hell of a game. And sounds like hopefully right decision, and they get to push on and try and show the school team what they can do. So yeah, really excited for them, and congratulations best of luck to everybody involved in that, both sides. Yeah, so really, really good news. Yeah,
it's absolutely awesome. Hats off to the RFU. Sort of made the decision originally, but have had a look at it and have decided that actually, do you know what they're saying is right. Let's get this game on, and all we and pretty much anyone else wants to see is lads getting out there playing a bit of rugby, having fun. So that's exactly what we're going to be getting there. Speaking of having fun and getting out there and playing rugby, the deadline for entry for the NextGen15 Spring League is this Friday. So get your emails in to either myself, Angus at nextgen15.com, or Jamie Harrison at Gordon School, and you will be able to register your interest. We've got loads of teams interested so far, 15, 16, hoping to convert interest into confirmation. But we're looking at a pretty cool tournament and some really cool teams. There's going to be some really exciting matchups because there's going to be some teams that don't necessarily play each other all the time, playing against each other, where you might get, for instance, a Hayes school, sort of up and coming state school, potentially up against someone like a Harrow development side. Just really cool to get those different fixtures. It should be pretty even contests with the nature of the way that teams are buying into. Let's put out an appropriate team for whatever the level of competition. Should be good fun. And a big point to make, having had a bit of a conversation with the RFU, which I forgot I hadn't made but intended to, is that the whole game on principle is very much in play with the Spring League. We want to just get the game played. If you haven't got a front row, we don't care. Just play. If you've only got 13 players, don't worry. We'll find a solution. Right? This is all about getting lads out on the field, having fun, playing a bit of rugby. So it's looking pretty exciting.
No, that sounds brilliant. So things like Hayes getting the opportunity there to play that, if they do, like that Harrow development side as a Hayes aside, I think linked up with London Scottish a little bit.
Yeah, they've got a London Scottish one, and they're now linking up a little bit with Ealing Trailfinders as well. So they got loads and loads of cool stuff going on down there. Yeah,
and then they'll play and really good again for that. Harrow will lose quite a few players to the Academies League, so we'll see some different names, maybe some kind of names for the next couple of seasons, some younger players, some guys who might have been mainly in the second team, maybe the third team this term, or under 16. So yeah, things like that really cool, because it's a great opportunity. So would encourage as many schools as can to sign up and just get involved.
Yeah, definitely get involved. Friday deadline, so get your messages in. We've got to get those fixtures arranged ASAP. Before we get into the rest, just a reminder of those live streams that I already mentioned. Bryanston Camford on Saturday, Kings Worcester, RGS Worcester on Monday, and then on Friday it's off to Merchant Taylors for their the culmination of their annual rugby week. 17th, we're down to Kingsholm in Gloucester for Cheltenham College against Sir Thomas Riches. And then a couple of days later, it's back down to the southwest for Millfield against Wellington College. It is, Millfield against Whitgift, rather. It is all go at the moment. So very exciting. After a bit of a break from rugby during half term, it's nice to have it back. And something that we introduced, and it's kind of going to build a fair bit of what we talk about today, sort of through half term, was our sort of a table of merit, in effect, using the chess ELO rating system. Basically, at the start of the season, I went through every single school in the country, which was a long process, let me tell you, and gave them a score, and that score was based on how they had done last year as under 18s, how they had done last year as under 16s, the strength of their fixture list, and a little bit of inside knowledge on, whether they were getting some players in on scholarships, etc. So I built it was a 350 team list, each with a rating, and basically what that rating means is that if you are number one and you play number two, you have a 1% better chance of winning than number two does over number one, and so on and so forth. And then through the season, that adjusts up and down. And it's used originally in chess. And I trust the people in chess because they are good at maths. But it's also now used for FIFA World Cup rankings, etc., etc. Anyway, it works as a system, is what I mean by that. Whether or not we like the outcome is a completely different kettle of fish, but it works as a system mathematically. So we put it out. Some people like it, some people don't, as is to be expected. It's reasonably accurate, I would say. There are some outliers, but they will probably get shaken out by the end of the season to their rightful position. I don't massively want to get into the ins and outs of it in terms of whether we like it, dislike it. It'd be interesting to get your take on it. And not liking it is a very plausible answer. Yeah, from my perspective, is it perfect? No. Is anything perfect? No. Is it more accurate than what currently exists? Yes. Does that mean it needs to exist? Possibly not. Is it fun for the kids? Yes. Is that the only thing I care about? Kind of yes. It's probably where I'd put my cards out on it, but it would be interesting to get your take, because it has been, some people have loved it, some people have really not loved it, and probably most people sit in the middle.
Yeah, I quite like it. I think a need to exist is an interesting debate, existentialism about anything to do with school or rugby. Like, does anything, do cups need to exist? Do fixtures need to exist? There are all sorts of debates had. Do we have to record scores? All these things you can get into, and fundamentally, I think we both believe in competition. We do believe in, we want good competition. And I think I said in the first podcast, people like to know who shakes out and where they come. Yeah. I also think this system is used. I like it, and this links to maybe something else like another sport I follow. I think it's the same system that the NCAA use, or is similar to.
Yeah, they use it.
I'm a massive college football fan, and those rankings always cause controversy, and fans kick off every year. But generally, come college football playoff time, they get it about right. I looked at this table when you published it, and I thought it was about right. It's certainly miles better. I've made no secret of the fact I think that Daily Mail merit table is an absolute joke, and all the things about being able to game it and stuff like that. This is so, and look, I'm not. It's very clear to anyone that I'm not involved in any way in this. I've got no association to it. I think it's miles better. The fact that, let's take a Whitgift, all right, for now, who have come out at 12 and think they've lost 3 or 4 games. There will be some teams who've won 7 out of 7 or something who'll be up in arms. What we're saying here is actually that doesn't matter, because they've played harder games. They've lost to Sedbergh, they've lost to Wellington, They've lost to Trinity, 3 of probably the top 10. So although Wellington may be slipping outside that top 10, and they probably, I would assume, I didn't see the pre-season, but that Wellington might have actually slipped down because they lost a couple of games maybe, and some other teams like managed to jump up. But yeah, look, nothing's perfect. This is better than what exists for me. I think you put it alongside Cup Comp, you put it alongside St. Joe's and other festivals like Murky, and we start to get a picture, and it provokes conversation, it provokes debate, and that's fun as well. And I think your point that, is it a bit of fun, like for those involved in the game at the time? Yes. And is that primarily what Next Gen's trying to do, which is, grow that game, get people talking about the game, highlight the great stuff about that game? Yeah. And I think this is another thing that does that. So I know it raised a bit of an issue around scholarship, and we're going to talk about that and the role of it, and that's a different point. But I thought it was cool. I thought it was a step forward from any sort of rankings that exists at the moment, and I'm sure loads of kids at schools involved, were quite keen to look at it. Would be my take.
Yeah, I mean, I there were 2 things that were really important to me with it. One was that sort of not inappropriate, perhaps too much of a strong word for it, but fixtures against teams where you're going to go and win 50-0, and you do go and win 50-0, actually gain no reward in this system. Other than the fact that you have won a game, it basically means nothing. And I was pretty keen to ensure that, because what we've, as we've spoken about time and time again, it really makes no sense for those games almost to exist, other than the fact that sometimes they are a historical fixture, and therefore, fine, absolutely, get it in your fixture list. But the fact that you've won 50-0 is kind of irrelevant to everyone. And that this kind of, it basically just smooths out that, yes, the game existed, but the big high that potentially could exist elsewhere with it just doesn't exist at all. And then the other bit was that if you're playing appropriate level fixtures and just losing them, that doesn't make you a bad team. It just makes you a team that is playing hard fixtures. And to reflect that in it, Whitgift, as you said, is a good example of that, where they've lost some games, but they are definitely one of the better teams in the country. There are lots of teams they could go and play and get those 50-0 wins, but they don't do that. They challenge themselves. So we wanted to be able to reflect that. Is it perfect? Of course not. Nothing is. There are some sides that I think are probably rightly agreed not to be there, for instance. On the other hand, again, that came down to an elective process. There are probably some teams or some people who are very annoyed about their team not being there, who may well actually be 26th or 27th, but we picked a cut-off point that we were going to publish, because another key principle for me was we didn't want to make people feel bad for not being as good as they might be. And we had to therefore pick a cut-off point of publishing. I actually have every team from 1 to 350, but I have no interest in putting out in public that we've decided that some team is the 318th side in the country. That does nobody any favours. So you've got to pick a cut-off point somewhere. So there's probably a lot of people that are very aggrieved who are actually incredibly close to being not aggrieved. They just don't know.
Yeah. I guess in some ways the harder one, just thinking about it, because obviously you have that start score, is a school, let's go to a school we talked about, someone like a Finborough, who, again, I have no idea where they would have been placed, but certainly if my perception of the table, they've kind of taken that first 15 world, caught it quite pretty by surprise. So they might have to work to get into that, but then the cup shakes that out. And kind of think, as you're saying too, as they keep accruing now kind of these big headline wins, because again, I think am I right in saying Finborough have beaten Ipswich, who were then 10th?
Beaten Ipswich.
Yeah. And that's, so it's, when there are sides, quite a few sides who've been beaten by the scores, and that's why people will moan. That's the nature of things. But
I always say on this, Man City sometimes lose to some people, but they still finish up at the top.
Yeah, so it's but what I would assume with the system, again, knowing nothing about it really, the mechanics of it, that if Finborough say clock up another couple of cup wins, they'd probably appear in the top 10, because they're getting these massive points jumps, I would assume, with every victory they get. So they could shoot from being, I don't know where they would be now. Let's say.
Oh, sorry, you cut
and then they could jump to being in the top 10 in a game or two, and that's
precisely, yeah. So I mean, just to give people a rough idea of how this works, you have let's just to pick out a couple of teams, because I'm looking at the table here. Clifton College in second place and Trinity currently in third place. Whichever one of them beats the other, were they to play each other, makes almost no difference to their place in the table, because they're so close they won't get much. But let's say Radley College, who are sitting in 24th, beat Clifton College, there's a huge jump for them. And the same would apply to someone like Finborough. If they play, their result against Ipswich, probably, I don't know off the top of my head what their original sort of prediction was, but I think we probably would have had them at, let's say, 100. Beating Ipswich will have jumped them from 100 to about 30.
Yeah.
They get another one like that, and as you say, they're jumping up and up. So it's interesting. I mean, there was a lot of positive, particularly from the kids, which really is the most important thing in all of these kind of things. There were also a lot of negatives, but I think a lot of them were quite constructive negatives. They were about whether this is pushing people towards too far away from a kind of development ethos and more into a winning ethos. I think on that, a little bit of that is dealt with if people actually take the time to go and have a read of how the system works, because it actually doesn't really reward inappropriate victory. It just rewards good competitive rugby is really the aim behind it. And perhaps we didn't explain that as well, but it's a good constructive bit of negative feedback in that it is with every time there is competition or comparison between teams, that debate is a live debate. Is this putting too much into whether teams are focused too much, or whether we are presenting school rugby as too much about result competition, etc., and should it be more about development? My answer to that a lot of the time is our job is to make it engaging and fun for the people that are the audience. School's job is still to make it fun, but school's job is to develop players, because we can't assist in player development. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't. We're not coaches. We're not able to see that progress from whatever a player arrives as to what they finish at. And when we can't help in that process, what we can help in is making that process as fun and engaging as possible for them.
Yeah,
and finding ways to do that. So I kind of rankle a little bit when we get told sometimes that we're pushing one way too much. It's the only direction we can push. We can praise development and we can praise what a school's ethos is on that, but we can't really participate in that because we're not a part of it. It's a live debate, and it's a fair one.
I think that I would say as someone who's been a head rugby at two schools, I think you just accept it for what it is. I'd like to think, and if you're getting wound up by it, I would, it's kind of, again, focus on what you can control. Like, so again, let's go when I was at the Caterham job, you wouldn't have been expecting to be seen in this top 25. We knew about where we were. We were probably trying, like, if we had a really good year, like towards the end, and probably actually the year after I left, Caterham may well have pushed towards being around 20 to 25, and that'd be amazing. But then actually, and then when you move to Wellington College, you're probably going to want to be in that top 10 every year, and you'll look at it, or certainly the players in your program will want to be. As a coach, you're not going to measure yourself by it. Like, so, I know for a fact that Wilco, Whitgift, Kyle at Wellington, like Noxie at Sedbergh, they won't be measuring their success, but they'll still be looking at what they're doing in their program.
I'd be worried if they were.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not with it. Again, and it's what was it? Is that it's just a bit of fun for the audience, the intended audience, and it's something, and it's a fun for people to engage with. I don't think people need to get. I don't think it is, like, you can argue anything that is a competition is inherently elitist, and there's issues with it. If elitism is meritocratic, it's kind of, if elitism is nepotistic, then it's not cool. And we're going to talk about scholarship stuff in a minute. But I think I would say if people are getting really wound up, don't. Like, this is just something that's there to kind of, again, to spotlight, get people talking about it, is trying to grow the game. And I'm, again, as someone who not currently coaching in a school but has come from that, I would say you just would have been like, yeah, that's a cool thing for the guys to look at, for the players and parents to look at, and that's exactly what it should be. So
it's all interesting stuff. I mean, we'll kind of park that side of it for now, but to the audience, do please get in touch. Like, we actively want your feedback on this. The best way that we can make this as good as it can be is if we get your views on it, and we can adjust and tweak to make sure that it reflects what you want to see. Ultimately, it's about what you want to see. So we'll keep the feedback coming. We really do welcome it. We'll fight back when we disagree with the feedback, but a lot of it is actually really useful. So, we want to hear it all. But a topic that's sprung out of this, I mean, it's a topic that always exists, but every so often a piece of content will go out and it will raise the debate again. And I suppose it's sort of three things in one topic. One is this perception that rugby doesn't care about state schools, that there is an elitism thing, and that the role of scholarships is a distorting factor and is a negative. To put it in the context of this table, a huge amount of feedback has been, oh, look at that, the top however many are all fee-paying schools who use scholarships extensively. It's just elitist. Now, there's a side of that is, as bare facts, that's true. As a negative, I think that's an unfair position for people to take on those schools. But you've been on the inside, the role that scholarships play far better than I do. And I think it'd be good to get the sort of facts out there for people on kind of how scholarships work, what they're for, and actually why they're not this force for evil that they're sometimes viewed as.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think firstly with some of that state school stuff, I assume that the ACE colleges they're not part of this, are they? So
we haven't included ACE colleges because there are no cross fixtures.
Yeah, and
they have their own league already anyway. It doesn't make sense to try and position.
And we probably have to be aware that if we were going to include ACE colleges, there'd be 4 of them in the top 25. So that would distort the balance again, right? To come to scholarship. So a few things. I think there are myths that exist out there, certainly that I've encountered a lot, and in reality, way more so when I was at Wellington than when I was at Caterham. It's because when you win more, people think you've acted in an underhand way. It's the nature of, unfortunately, doing well. Scholarships are. So the idea that people like myself, when I was in that role, go around watching state school games on a touchline, that had the time to do that, and going, where are you going for sixth form? We can just make it free. That isn't true. Okay, that is not true, and it certainly isn't true of any of the schools that I've been involved with. It certainly isn't true of any schools that I know the workings of, and I would just be absolutely flabbergasted if that existed anywhere. The reality of scholarship, so independent schools are charities. Okay, they have charitable status. That's controversial in its own right in this country. That's a political issue. That isn't for us to discuss now.
It's just a fact. It's
discussion. Take that as fact. These schools have a duty to do something, so to provide opportunities. One way in which they do that is by seeking pupils who wouldn't get the opportunity that they could be afforded at that independent school at the current situation they are in. Quite often, because of defunding, and again, the funding of sport in state schools is not something we have any control over, but it has dwindled. Okay, lots of state schools now don't have allocated game sessions, so very few, like as a percentage, can offer Saturday sport, and we have heaped praise upon those who are fighting against all sorts of odds to kind of be super competitive within that, but it isn't there for lots of kids. So I would say I'm a huge fan of scholarship in the right way, in terms of, when you're finding someone, quite often and it's quite often linked with an academy. So through a DPP program, this is, again, I can only talk from personal experience. So you'd speak to and say, look, is there anybody at non-rugby playing school who you think's got bags of potential, who you think would benefit here? There's also other issues around kind of, if you're in a boarding environment, if home situations can be different. No, there are other things where boarding schools particularly can provide a safe haven for really talented kids if life at home is chaotic. So those ones, I think, that is the overwhelming majority. There are controversies. If you go back 15 years, there was a lot more movement between rugby playing schools, if you want. Those ones, understandably, cause more issue. And I would, again, I'm not a big fan of them, like people moving from a decent rugby playing school to what's perceived as a better one. Now, again, people push us. I've also, when I was the head of rugby, we had people move from schools who were perfectly, like, really good rugby programs. It was never driven by us, okay? It was driven by the people and the parent, and you'd speak to the school. I think that this perception that, again, that kind of people are acquiring talent isn't quite true. What you're trying to do is provide opportunity. You're trying to provide a transformative experience to give a people the chance to excel in what's in their chosen sport, and be that rugby, cricket, football, hockey, lacrosse. There's so many, schools, netball. These answers don't exist in school rugby, and then hopefully the chance to excel educationally as well. So that if, because the chances of getting a contract are slim, that you can then give them the support they need to go off to a really good university. So overwhelmingly, for me, scholarships have a positive role to play. Of course, they impact the level of a team. You can't deny that. Okay, look, and I'll speak about my team on a bit. We were made better by boys that came in. All right, that at both Caterham and at Wellington. Yep. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We'd be very honest in conversation. If we played each other, we're having a chat after a game or before the game, you'd say, "Oh, look, these three lads kind of joined at sixth form." No one's hiding it.
Right. That's all.
Yeah, schools have different approaches. So again, some schools want to be cup eligible, which means you want to probably only have 3 or 4 boys new to school in the system. Some schools aren't as bothered by that, and they may be less full. So they may want to some schools might be trying to use rugby as a kind of big PR vehicle for their school. So that's then where it gets a bit more. We want to get a few more guys in. Yeah. And I get why people get annoyed, but it's actually, if you look at those characters, see them as individual people, they are generally young people who are so deserving of an opportunity, who really benefit, not just rugby-wise, but educationally from that opportunity, and come out the other side of it, hopefully, better people, better equipped for the world beyond school. Now, the fact they've helped their school win a few games they might not have won, all right, that rankers with a few angry parents on a sideline, but overwhelmingly the game and the school have done a good thing, would be my take on it.
Well, to me, they've not been given a scholarship to join a rugby team. They've been given a scholarship to join a school, and that's the bit that sometimes gets lost, is that the rugby is really just one very small part of school life, in terms of the time it takes up. Really is about giving people opportunities. There's probably a handful every year where you go, you've not really got more of an opportunity. You've just moved from one place that's full of opportunities to another that's full of opportunities. Maybe those ones are a little more controversial, but as you say, often in those scenarios, they are driven not by the school that's offering a scholarship or giving a scholarship, but by the player and their families themselves, or oftentimes by an academy who's gone, this is a very promising rugby player. We basically require you to move to X, Y, or Z school, or we're going to find it very difficult to progress further with you. That's not the school's fault. It's not really anyone's fault other than kind of the academies and that sort of scenario. There's an awful lot more nuance to this than is often met with. I think sometimes where the debate really arises from is that often it means that state schools and smaller schools that perhaps have quite sort of proud rugby programs, but they don't necessarily get the recognition for that, because when it gets to sixth form, when there's a bit more noise about things, they've lost a lot of their sort of top level players, and I think that possibly rankles with them. Now, the reality is we have a part to play in that. If we had the info, we could probably praise a little bit more about what has been done. And I would always shout out to any school, like, if a player of yours has moved, or a pupil of yours has moved from your school to a different school in sixth form, let us know, because we'll praise you. We will give you the credit for having played a role. But I think that maybe is where it rankles, is that some feel that they get boxed out.
Yeah.
Of conversation. And you then get the state school issue, in that there are sport in state schools, as you say, is a declining force just because of funding. The other bit on the state school kind of wider argument, why do state schools not feature more? We do have to remember that rugby is a minority sport. Football is the most popular sport in the country by miles. There are not that many state schools that play rugby. There are some, and they do a really good job of it. We've spoken about it in the past. Just to name a couple off the top of our head, we've already mentioned the Judd, Cardinal Newman, John Fisher have been wonderful for years. RGS High Wycombe, one of the most historic rugby schools in the country. There are lots and lots that do a really, really great job. But fundamentally, there are not that many that play rugby, because most people play football, and that's fine. And it's always a bit that's I think gets ignored on the kind of rugby is an elitist sport argument, which is, people forget that rugby is a minority sport.
Yeah, and I think there is a money thing with the provision, in terms of independent schools can afford to hire someone in the title of head of rugby. At a state school, it will generally be what expertise is held by the PE staff. So again, this isn't about the parable of me, but my academic subjects isn't PE. So I've held a head of rugby post at two schools. I don't teach PE. That would be, I would assume, nigh impossible in the state sector, just in terms of timetabling. But the independent sector can afford that luxury. I think there's also a really good point there about kind of acknowledging, kind of players, origin story. I mean, you want to say, in terms of, a player's pathway, begins at, when they're under 9 or whatever, they're in their local rugby club. But schools acknowledging that when someone has joined and played a big part is important. Again, I don't mean to embarrass someone, so we're going to talk about in a minute, but take Cassius Cleves then, who was at Wellington when I was there. He talks a lot about that he went to work both Wimbledon College and at Wellington College. We tried, when we would put stuff out about Cass, to tag Wimbledon College in it, and I would like to think that Neil at Wimbledon, who does an incredible job at Wimbledon College, would feel that Cassius moving was the right thing for Cass at that time and helped him progress, and he felt that Wimbledon College rightly got the recognition, because Wimbledon College played a huge role in Cass's
I would genuinely say, and this is not because you brought him up and because he was under your guidance for a couple of years, but Cassius Cleves is actually one of the best examples of a player whose first senior school was well recognised as playing a role. More so than most other players, I think, partly because Wimbledon College are very good on social media, and partly because of the nature of the two schools. You were both very good at working together to kind of talk about what the situation.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, like, just give Cassius his credit. He was very proud to be from both schools, and that's, he was very keen. He was so deeply embedded in, and loved playing for Wellington College. When it came to the point that he might have to miss games for representative rugby, so he never wanted to do that. He wanted to remember getting ruled out through injury before the Semper game. He was desperately like fighting to not, he wanted to, that playing in that shirt meant the world to him, but also his time at Wimbledon College meant a huge amount to him. That win at Roslyn Park with that Wimbledon College team, meant a huge amount to him. So, and that's really, he was a great ambassador for that. And you're right, it was we were able to do that, but there were others. Again, as you said, social media profile helps, because there were other guys who came where we weren't able to, because maybe that school, again, a couple of guys who came. So let's say Will Hobson, another guy who joined, his professional rugby playing out in the state sector, where he came from, didn't play as much rugby, so there wasn't a PE department, a sports department account we could tag. When
interaction is just harder to generate.
So it made it a bit harder for us to kind of put it out there that, look, we're very proud of this player and we think we've played a role, but actually we also acknowledge that lots of we would tag Harlequins, and the academy, because you're trying to get understand that this is holistic. No one person is in charge of a player's development. It takes a village to kind of take a cliche and use it slightly differently. So I think that's really important. But lots of these boys, as you said, there are a few every year where you go, did you need to go? And there'll be a few people who go, look, yeah, I get that, and they're all fine. But there's a few where people didn't need to move, and I could throw a couple of Wellington College boys who moved from other places where they didn't need to go, and that's kind of fair. But you got to think, do you want to take away these incredible opportunities that hundreds of young men and women get across sports every year for the sake of a couple of ones where that, again, can sit a bit and come through, but for reasons, as you said, quite often not in the kind of destination school's control. It could be sat with parents, sat with outside stakeholders. And also, again, these aren't, as I said, go right back to the start, the idea that free rides are giving out to loads and loads of kids is just not true. There is more bursary for the charitable status at play, which means, which is right. And if you're going to get a scholarship, you have to work hard, and you have to show you're going to be a good member of that community, that you're going to be in the classroom, take study seriously. You're not showing up to be a professional rugby player from 16 to 18. You're going, as you said, you're going to a school. You're expected to be an ambassador for that school, to play an active role in all parts of the life of that school. And in my experience, overwhelmingly, these guys have. Again, I think back to Caterham, and a guy called, again, I'll name drop another guy, hopefully I won't, but a guy called Kwesi Afena-Williams, right, who came in, again, same sort of idea as came from Rutlish School, another, like, again, decent state school program. We would try and tag them, and he's gone on. Now his rugby has accelerated, but he's gone on. He's got a first class degree. He's flying professionally. He went on to be head of the boarding house. He was deputy head of school. He got amazing opportunities like through that I think he would say he wouldn't have got in the environment he was in. And I hope that isn't embarrassing to Cassius or Kwesi by doing that. But it's, there are so many brilliant young people who deserve these opportunities. We can't give them all opportunities. But schools overwhelmingly are trying to do good things by very deserving young people when they give out scholarships. They're not just thinking about, we're going to get the win in that derby match, would be my point.
Well, also what always happens in these scenarios is that everyone gets just sort of tarred with the brush of handing out scholarships like confetti. First of all, that doesn't happen. Second of all, there are lots of teams, just to use the table we put out the other day, there are lots of teams up in that sort of top 25 zone that don't have anyone on scholarships.
Yeah,
but people just go, well, it's just a posh public school, they're giving out scholarships. And it's like, well, no, that's not quite how it works. And there's a perception that is a long way from the reality. It's primarily it's unfair on the kids, really, that are going out there and playing and getting sick for having a scholarship they don't even have.
I guess my last, again, you're right, the last couple of points from me on it would be, you're right, your point about how big a game rugby is, at ages 9 to 11 or 9 to 13, depending on the entry point of that, rugby is played much more widely in independent preparatory schools than it is in state primaries. Most students who go to independent prep schools go on to independent senior schools. Some go to grammar schools and some go to state school. Of course they do, but that gives independent schools a competitive advantage into and is that right? No, but it's not. We can't change that right now. We're not in a position to. My last point would be, it's kind of a plea to people to stop using the word import. I hate it. Like when people used to talk at me about, and even people use it quite a lot. Who are the imports this year? Like people would argue, it's like, can we not commoditize children? We're talking about young people's lives. Okay, it's a young person who will have worked phenomenally hard to earn a scholarship, to earn an opportunity. If we can remove the use of word import, this isn't something a school orders from Amazon, right? So I just think that, to me, that's a personal grievance. I hate that term. And I would say, we're talking about people, young people, who have, again, overwhelmingly worked phenomenally hard to get where they are. Let's give them the respect they deserve. Like the status of scholar, that's cool. Like brand somebody as an import, I don't think is a nice thing to do.
If someone comes in on an academic scholarship, no one's calling them an import, are they? And
100%. And that was 100%.
Supporting scholarship is exactly the same thing as an academic or a music scholarship. It is just a recognition of the fact that you are someone who has shown ability and promise in an area, and someone wants to give you a great opportunity in life. That is it. It's not about anything else. I don't know if anyone can tell, but we both care quite a lot about this. But we're going to park it there because we've gone on for ages, and I want to look ahead to the weekend. We'll kind of go through it quite quickly, but there are just some great fixtures. One fixture that I was really looking forward to that is now not on Saturday and is on Wednesday of next week is Hampton versus Harrow, because that's a cup fixture that is going to be awesome. Two unbeaten sides going head to head. Two sides, of course, that are in the top 10 of that table. It's going to be a cracker, but it's a little way away now. But there's some that are really jumping out to me. I'm really excited about Judd against Campion. That's just to go back to the conversation we've just been having. That is two really great state schools going head to head. That'll be absolutely awesome. On another state school actually going up in what is a really historic fixture, and I actually think this year probably a very even fixture, Dulwich against John Fisher. I think that could be a really competitive.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, probably neither kind of quite hitting that. They again both got good groups, maybe neither quite hit the heights they would have hoped to at the start. And again, that Judd Campion game as well, that's again probably two, if you were going to do a historic kind of last 20 years top 10, they'd both be there. It swung back and forth. Judd probably going as favourites this Saturday, but if you were playing that game in the certainly kind of early part of the 21st century, Campion would have been heavy favourites in that one. So it's nice to see like those derbies develop. So it's like really, really cool again, and again three states was in two really big games there. Yeah, that Dulwich Fisher one is really intriguing. Yeah, after who's going to come out firing?
Yeah, I genuinely think that's one where you could say that could go either way. Another one that I'm quite interested in is Cranley against RGS Guildford. Largely because RGS Guildford taking that early scalp in the season against Epsom College, tailed off a little bit towards half term. Cranley probably not quite where they've been in years past, but still a very good team. But I actually think a bit of a local derby as well, kind of not too far away from each other. I think that's another one that could be quite close. Could surprise a few people with how close that one could be.
Yeah, again, Cranley a little. We haven't talked a lot about Cranley, which would be, surprising. And they're going okay. It's not, again, probably not a vintage year for them, but they're a good side. And I say RGS Guildford came out firing. Amazing result at the start. As you say, there's a bit of I don't know how much they probably compete a little bit for students at the bottom end. So there's a little bit of bragging rights on offer there.
Sure there's a little bit going on, isn't there?
And stuff. So that'll be again, you'd probably say for the first time in a long time, maybe RJ Guildford going as favourites in that one, which you probably wouldn't have said that for some time. So now I've said that, it's going to go the other way. So I don't know about the first two, but yeah, again, good luck to all of those. That'll be a great game, yeah.
Where else are we this weekend? Sedberg, Denston College. That's a really interesting one. I think Denston could give Sedberg one of their tougher games so far this season. Physical outfit. That's probably if you're gonna cause Sedberg problems, I think you've got to be pretty physical against them. Sedberg always are a very slick handling side. What's the best way to counter that? It's being very physical. It's making people go backwards, putting them under pressure to perform those skills. Denston are well placed to do that. Sedberg still go in as favourites, but they'll have to be at their best, I would say.
Oh yeah, look, Rupert will have got Denston prepped. I can't. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Like you kind of think, right, how do we exactly what you said? Right, we're going to have to combat Sedberg's skills, with line speed by giving them no space to play. Something we talked about a bit when we tried unsuccessfully to get a win against them. But they are so good at playing around line speed. They're the way for a schoolboy side, and again it's through the years, so it's credit to the coaches through the school, like the way they are able to hold their depth and execute like catch pass at speed. It makes it look simple. It makes it look like they're playing against like that they've got heavy numbers up all the time. So they just manage. Most teams will try and jam, kind of not let them get outside the 12 channel, and they will just be able to get outside that, and then all of a sudden they'll break down that outside 15 and make 30 metres, and it looks like they've just stood there and pivoted and caught and passed, and people are like, well, that's easy. It's so far from easy what they said with teams do.
I always find it extraordinary watching, and I guess it's a view that you only really get pitch side, but standing pitch side watching Sedberg, the ambition in the level of depth that they have on their attack is kind of mad. Like, we've all been coached. We've all been in teams where everyone's talking about depth and add more depth, and you try, but there comes a point where it feels like you're almost, I'm so deep. It's just, this is just silly. Like I can't. I need to start. I need to get higher. That thought never seems to cross the minds of a Sedberg pupil. The depth they have is extraordinary. They're just to the point where you see guys and you think he's just out of the game. He's only coming in phase 4 or 5 because he's so deep, and then you find that's how they've countered the line speed. I find it extraordinary to watch, and it's a testament to the pace and fitness that they've got as well.
Yeah, and to be fair, pretty unusual. Most will be kind of get flat to get wide, and the way the game is going. And look, Sedberg can still do that, and we're not like Sedberg up front. That's a decent pack, and they'll be able to muscle up and try and fight fire with fire as well. And maybe that's why they're so hard, is that they can win that arm wrestle and then also win the game of chess. But look, Denston will go there and they won't go down without firing a shot. That's for sure. And it'll be again, for me, that it'd be a good game to watch. Probably an interesting challenge. Yeah, I think.
Might be interesting. There's loads and loads of fixtures. We could go on for ages at going in on depth on loads of fixtures, but just to quickly run through a few that I also think particularly stand out. Warwick against Bedford should be a pretty tight and exciting game. Rugby School against Stamford equally, I think, could be a really good game. Ipswich against Haileybury. Ipswich, you'd say, going as favourites to that, but I also think there's a potential for a really good game there. One though that I just want to flag up. I think we both would say that we know where this one would go in terms of the result, but I find it quite an interesting fixture. Is Radley College against Kirkham Grammar School? Not two schools that I would necessarily go, I see them playing against each other. Very much not on each other's circuit, but quite a cool fixture for that reason.
That is cool. Is it at Radley?
At Radley.
Yeah. It's. I would, Radley been getting better for a while now. Nick Wood's been there, and they kind of, again, and doing it through intake as opposed to 16 plus. To go back to our earlier conversation, they've been working very hard at getting good kind of guys joining the school. Yeah, again,
a lot of props as well. Nick Wood's clearly working on the front row.
Yeah, and again, you get a bit of internal. They've obviously Will Stewart's come through there, and that's a bit of internal inspiration. You can hang your hat on that, and it's the place you can come and get better, and all those sorts of things. And there's another couple of props as well who I've not mentioned there, so apologies. But it's I think I would say, and we say, look, let's give a bit of kind of tip of the hat to Radley there for stepping outside what is normally a very traditional fixture list and going, all right, like we think we've got a bit better now. Let's go and try and play Kirkham Grammar and see how we go. So yeah, as you say, really really interesting fixture there. That's a cool one.
A really cool fixture. And then just another one I want to get your take on, really. A bit of a classic fixture, cross border, Millfield, and you'll have to check my pronunciation, but Millfield against Llandovery College.
Yeah, Llandovery, but yeah, you're all right. Yeah, you did all right for an Englishman. You did all right.
I tried to do it really fast so you wouldn't be able to catch it.
It's like, where's that being played this year?
At Millfield.
Yeah, so that's one that's been going a while. So and it's got tougher. So Llandovery, for those that, again, we don't talk a lot about the Welsh system, but Llandovery used to primarily play in a kind of, they would have been, if we were doing this in the early part of 21st century, they would have been a school we talked about because they played primarily English independent schools. Then the Welsh colleges system came in order to have academy-based players in Wales. They had to play part of that, so they're kind of a bit shackled by that system. But they keep a few traditional fixtures going, and those two are Milford and Sedbergh primarily. It's one that's gone both ways. Probably at the moment, it's interesting. It depends what side they put it. So you need to look at where the Welsh colleges fixtures lie. So if Llandovery have a colleges league game like on the Wednesday, because that's played on Wednesdays, it can be a bit of a mismatch. Whereas if they've got a bye week, then it's probably tighter. Probably Millfield favourites at the moment. Millfield's like really strong year. Knowing a little bit about Llandovery this year, they're not. A couple of years ago, they got back to being super strong again. Got to the colleges final. Aren't quite where they were, but they're still bloody good. Sorry, probably language there. But yeah, those games are cool. Like in terms, a bit. It's not quite the same as that sort of Sedbergh Blackrock game, but it's just they're cool to see.
It's a cool historic fixture, isn't it?
Yeah.
And now you'll know more about this than me, but two schools that do some cool stuff with their socks, which I always like. I like niche sock stuff. Millfield, if you get your colours, you move from having a navy blue set of socks to a royal blue set of socks. I've actually got a pair of those because I got them as a gift, which was very exciting.
That's cool.
For a school rugby nose like myself. And Llandovery College is it if you played against Sedbergh, you get a different set of socks? Is that right?
Yeah. So it always used to be that. So Christ Brecon used to be the big game, and that would have its own week. And there's a whole sort of thing around a toy monkey and a dinner after it, and which again
is that like the toy they put on? Is it when the Scarlets play Bath or something? There's a
goes on top of the post. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so which actually has a bit of a dark, because a monkey was killed a long time by boys in the sort of late 90s, in the early part of 20th century. But so you'd have a separate chapel, so you'd be presented them. That has moved now because that game got cancelled. So it was the oldest schoolboy fixture in the country, and then because Llandovery got so much stronger, Christ College Brecon actually got a little bit better in the last couple of years. So it'd be nice to see. And I think I think they play through the school, and kind of hopefully everyone would love to see that game back on. But it's there'll be a socks and shorts kind of ceremony for special games, and someone will come in and do presentations. And when you get your colours, you get a different blazer as well, as is the case at lots of schools. But yeah, they'll have different socks for the Sedbergh game, I think, now, which has replaced the Brecon game as that one. But cool things when you're involved.
100%. Well, who doesn't like stash? Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Everyone likes a bit of stash. Just to finish off on fixtures, there are loads and loads of really great fixtures. Obviously, Sherborne, Clifton College, Tunbridge St Paul, loads and loads and loads of great fixtures. But we don't have time to go through them all. Otherwise, we would literally be here all day. But just to finish up on that, please do tune in. 2:45 kickoff on Saturday. Bryanston against Camford. I think it should be a pretty decent game. Two sides that have, in the past, had some really, really top teams, and it'd be nice to have them playing on the live stream. But final bit of business today: wingers for our greatest school 15 of the last decade. Backline so far: Alex Mitchell from Lymm High School at scrum half, Marcus Smith from Brighton College at fly half, an all-star centre partnership currently going at it together at Bath of Cameron Redpath from Sedbergh and Ollie Lawrence from Bromsgrove. And now it's the job of the two men outside them. There are so many options here.
Yeah, I think I've got 15 names at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nuts. I mean, there are lots of guys who we probably won't talk about because they are primarily fullbacks in their school career, although they might be playing now. You know, for instance, a guy like Lewis Liner.
Yeah.
At Hampton, I think probably Sam Aspland-Robinson comes into that conversation as well. He's played his pro career as a winger. Now I think actually playing down at Rosslyn Park a little bit outside centre. But as a schoolboy, primarily a fullback. So we've got a few of those guys where we're, because of the sheer numbers, we're going to go, you were a schoolboy fullback, so you're a fullback for the purposes of our conversation. That doesn't really narrow the list down at all, though, because there are some extraordinary players. I guess we may as well start at Wellington College, actually, with a guy that I think is probably the one that we're going to decide is definitely in. But I suppose just before I do that, the list from Wellington College is quite extraordinary. One guy I want to definitely talk about is Ben Loader. And then we'll come on to Cassius Cleves, who we've already mentioned. But Ben Loader, an extraordinary schoolboy player, probably excelled more as a pro than as a schoolboy, which is not to knock his schoolboy performances. But I think he has gone on to greater things as a pro relative to his schoolboy performance. Both of them were 10 out of 10. It's just that his pro has moved into sort of 12 out of 10.
Yeah, I think he played in that, so obviously before my time at Wales, he played in that side, and I'm going to get this wrong now, but I think he played with Sam Aspland-Robinson, and in that.
I think they had a year together, and they had Tom Parton as well.
Yeah, I was going to say in T-Pit, yeah. So Tom Parton, and what was, you could argue whether that Rosslyn Park side or Cam Redpath Sedbergh Rosslyn Park side are, probably two, if we're going to choose a kind of a team of the decade for Rosslyn Park, so those two, that Wellington side and that Sedbergh side. I remember seeing them when I was there with Caterham at the time, just being like, that's a level, they are a level above everybody here, just so comfortable. Because again, I had Sam on my list because again, and this is what, again, you'll know the years better, because I thought that back three was at school was Aspland-Robinson, Loader, and Parton.
Yeah, I think now that I think about it, I think
maybe
I think they had one year where I think Aspland-Robinson must have been there. They were out kilter, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think they played one year where they were all together, and in that year, Parton was at fullback. And I think they had another year where they weren't, and Aspland-Robinson was at fullback.
Okay.
But I mean, we're testing the limits of memory now.
Yeah, no, 100%. So it's
either way. What an insane back three.
And I think an interesting one. So again, different players. Sam very kind of footwork, speed based. Obviously has moved to 9. Had a little go at playing 9 and stuff like that at a higher level, because that kind of, can he snipe and get around and beat a player? Ben Loader's game maybe more suited now to the current professional game, in that had a bit more power in it. He's got a bit more height, his frame,
very powerful, very quick.
That kind of kick chase. He'd be again. If you want to get, we can get into a bit of kind of. He for me would be a really good 14 as opposed to an 11 in terms of if you want to see a difference between them. Some coaches again will argue there isn't one; they're just wingers. So that's a bit of that's up for debate in and of itself.
Well, let's explore that a bit. What you've been coaching in this game a long time. What are the differences between 11 and 14? Are there differences? What's the?
Yeah.
I think a lot of kids don't necessarily know.
Well, So if you're going to see a difference, like there's lots of really like we just pick our team and schoolboy level, which I like, not that much. There's a couple of things you might look for. So obviously we're saying an 11 is normally a left wing, 14 normally right wing. So a first one that's really basic is that in any sort of sub-elite level, schoolboy rugby sub-elite, people can generally pass off their right hand better. So if you look at tries, 11s tend to score more tries than 14s. So quite often you want your most dangerous finisher wearing the 11 shirt, not the 14 shirt. Although quite often wingers like coming off, 14 can be blind, also like coming in. They then get into, as you go up a level, and probably only a handful of schools, although that could be being disrespectful, but certainly when you look at the Academies League, and that's something I know probably our audience will watch, and certainly Prem Rugby, most 9s are right-footed, which means that right wings tend to receive better box kicks because of the angle of them. So there's more contestable kicks on a 14 than there are on 11. It's why left-footed kickers are so valuable. So you might want a 14 to be a bit taller, a bit better in the air. So that's why I'm talking about someone like Ben, okay, who, again, look at the weekend with like his ridiculous aerial skills there. And the same goes for, but then the other thing with is if you've got outrageous speed, you might also want to play. So let's go to someone like Lewis Rees-Zammit, someone we'll also talk about. He would also be instinctively a 14, kick and chase winger, or Gloucester playing a very kick and chase based game at the moment. When you can win that foot race, most players are still right footed. The shape of that right footed kick means that the arc of it will mean it stays on the pitch for longer. If you're in, so he can chase more. So if a 12 or a 30 just puts it through, like he's more likely to win that foot race. So kind of, I guess Johnny May's actually switched between them. He kind of can play again, and wingers can play both sides. You get very few.
His style of wing play has changed considerably, though, as time has gone on, as he switched between the two, hasn't it?
Yeah. So you get some who kind of really want to play in one. I guess if you look at Caden Murley at the moment would be a kind of classic 11, and I've put him on my list. I know we talked about him as a 13, but he was such a good schoolboy, and he did get in a bit, and I just thought he's worth considering again, even if it's as a, and he's doing so well now that he very classic 11 kind of. He's going to get that ball in transition, and again, particularly in school rugby, so again, if you in your club, if you've got somebody who want to get their hands on the ball, they're more likely to get it on the left wing. I think there's some. I think over at below Prem level, kind of, I think they score about 3 tries to 1 left, like 11s over 14s. So that's worth thinking about. But fundamentally, they're wingers and they attack.
But it's always an interesting thing because as you go through the ranks, you see players that very much see themselves as one or the other, and coaches will see them as one or the other, and like most people instinctively know the passing thing, although I've always thought that's easily solved by practice. The kicking thing, I think, is really interesting, and it's that aspect of almost your right winger is your athlete winger, and your left winger is your skills winger, I suppose. Is kind of a way. Kinda.
Yeah, and it was and so to go to when we go back then to Cassius, like we deliberately, so Cassius liked when he came into the first, he wanted to play on the right wing. He played there. His step off his right foot is ridiculous, but he could use that. But we wanted to get him playing 11 so that he could get more touches of the ball. And again, someone who maybe has an unfair advantage here, and that I've got more knowledge of him in terms of, I was very fortunate enough to witness him play up close and personal for a couple of years. But for a while playing first team rugby at what is a pretty high standard of first team rugby in the country, he was averaging nearly 5 points a touch, and that's to be doing that against teams like Millfield, teams like Whitgift, he's not doing that against teams who are just showing up and playing. So they're doing it against teams who know he's coming. So for me, I think, and it's that. Again, I'm aware Cassius had a lot of pressure put on his shoulders, and I don't mean to add more to that, but I would say he's the best winger I've seen in my time around schoolboy rugby. And kind of, for me, it's then a fight between the other guys for a shirt. But that's kind of probably where I sit on it.
I'd agree. I mean, Cassius Cleves was it remains, but was a kind of almost a freakish schoolboy player in that he could create almost out of nothing something. As you say, that step he had was unbelievable. His pace was incredible, and actually his understanding of where he needed to be was brilliant. So often he just found himself in the right place, and that's not luck. He knew the game he was playing.
That's the thing. I think Cassie's rugby IQ got underrated a lot, as did his core skill. And he was a super high level rugby player in all aspects of the game. And Cass can really kick a ball, as he's having shown us. But we just at Wellington, we wouldn't want him to kick it. You want him to run at schoolboy rugby. So it's
get the ball in your hands and then kick it away.
Yeah, he generally had everything in his locker. So I think, well, there you go. We've got one. So let's give Cass the 11 shirt, because he'll get the ball. Although he's going to have. I think it's not going to matter whether you're on the right or left wing in this team. You're going to get the ball.
I think these lads inside him can pass it. He should be all right.
I think they can catch pass all right. Yeah.
All right. Who to put with him? God, that's the question. I'm going to go back in time a bit to throw out some names.
Yeah.
And throw out a really dodgy pronunciation as well. St. Joseph's College, George Wakakoki, or Wakathoki, I think might be how you pronounce it.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
He was, he still is. I mean, he's still forging a pro career up at Newcastle Falcons. But he, as a school player, he was extraordinary at times, and without sort of wanting to sort of put too much of a generalization on him, he typified what you might consider a Fijian winger to typify. All outrageous skill. You never knew quite what was coming, and he just did extraordinary things in a team that was playing some great stuff. I mean, he was playing that team that had Lewis Ludlam in the back row and stuff. So he was getting some front football, that was for sure. But he did some brilliant stuff. That's
the team that won St. Joe's, isn't it?
Yeah.
You would. Yeah, that's a good. I didn't know he wasn't on my list. That's outrageous. I didn't see that much for him, but I remember actually watching him play an age group game, and he was phenomenal. And again, looked ready for the next level, which I think is that kind of, you almost, when it looks too easy in a way. So I think he's got to be in that mix. Yeah, another one in that conversation. I'm trying to narrow my list down. I mean, we might have it there. Would be Henry Arundel from Harrow, just in terms of, actually it wasn't an amazing Harrow group he was surrounded by, so that's maybe the challenge. I remember he probably pulled them to be more competitive than they should have been, but that his Harrow team wasn't, say, as strong as this current Harrow group. They were still good, don't get me wrong, but they weren't quite as strong. So that's, when we talk about, because Cass was involved in some phenomenal Wellington College first teams. George clearly has been involved in that St. Joe's team that's done something at St. Joe's. But Henry, in a team that was struggling, I remember him scoring an incredible try running up the slope at Wellington, and just an incredible.
Most people's legs are going to jelly halfway up that.
Yeah, so I think he's in the conversation.
He's a massive shout. Possibly in the conversation at fullback as well.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. Did he play 15 at school a bit? Yeah.
He played both. He's. This is difficult.
I guess to go to the different types of wingers. Again, you could get Diago Bailey, who was around the sense of the powerful boy. Ollie Hassel-Collins, a couple of guys who come out of the ACE system there.
I guess if we were to go back to your earlier 11s versus 14s, Someone like Bailey, we would probably view as being a 14, given his sort of athletic ability. He's a really good player. He still is a really good player. He was a very good player as well. Ollie Hassel-Collins as well. Rotimi Shagan at Stowe, Northampton School for Boys. Prior to that, he was brilliant in a similar way to what Henry Pollock and Archie McParland are doing. He really dragged a Stowe side. I can't remember the name. There was a flanker as well who was pretty good at the same time as him, and they dragged Stowe to being an incredibly competitive side for that period. He was really impressive. I think his brother was there as well and played at 13. Their dad,
Tozin was his brother.
Yes,
Tozin,
yeah.
And then again, same area as, because I think they both started at NSB. Those boys, and they moved over, and then obviously there's Ollie Slightholme in the last few years who stayed at, and NSB, to go back to our kind of stopped that movement of players at 16, and we're seeing kind of the fruits of that now, with them kind of being super competitive at first team level. Ollie again did a very powerful winger, in terms of like would more likely to run over you than round you, but quick enough, and good player there. Going back a bit further, maybe one that it would be Gabriel Batoye, from kind of the
very good.
In what was meant to be the Trinity team that was meant to do what this Trinity team has done. I mean, they were a hell of a side, that Trinity side, but Gabriel was really good against someone who, again, I might get this wrong, I think he played under 20s young, and he sort of played first team young. Again, hasn't quite. He's back. Is he playing in France now, or is he back in the UK?
Because he was in Israel for a while, and then he was at Gen, I think, and he's been back and forth. I'm not quite sure where he is.
And it's just sort of, but hasn't, but you still think there's time for Ibatoy, and if he just gets that opportunity, kind of could be Christian Wade has kind of maybe doesn't, we talked about, had that kind of explosive step and go, maybe didn't quite, maybe not quite the all court game, which is why at that kind of slightly more, you've got to be more cautious, but again, was an absolutely electric schoolboy to watch. Right.
Oh, it's tricky.
You're the boss.
Well, I'm gonna just throw out some names that we don't need to discuss much, but just to give them a bit of a shout out. Tom Roebuck from Wirral Grammar School, who's actually got into the England squad now. Aaron Reid from Kirkham Grammar School, the top schoolboy player. An interesting one as a schoolboy was Joe Falconer-Singer. Kind of at Bushy Academy, so didn't really have a huge amount of schoolboy rugby under his belt, and then kind of got selected through the England age group sides, and it was like, oh god, this guy's a freak, and he's doing stuff at London Irish as well. In the academy, I probably wouldn't include him really in the deep conversation on this, because he didn't, as a schoolboy, he didn't really get the opportunity to do a huge amount in the school scene, but despite that, it was very clear that he was definitely going to go on and be a pro. So he's a sort of interesting one. Another one, Paolo Adogwu, and then going back a little further, guys like Nathan Earl and Howard Packman, right in that sort of 2012, 2013. It's probably just on the outskirts of this conversation.
Nathan Earl was ridiculous as a schoolboy. I'd forgotten about him. He was so good as a schoolboy.
He was I suppose, to the conversation we're having, a real 14. He was just so much pace, and almost impossible to stop. I guess played an awful lot of fullback as well at Oaklands, because they wanted to get his hands on the ball, I suppose.
I guess you could include within that someone who it would be another Oakham boy, Tyrese Johnson Fisher.
He's an interesting one, isn't he? Because he
maybe didn't quite fulfil his under 15 promise at first. But then he was focusing on American football. So
yeah, exactly. Focusing on American football. He's sort of
backing you now.
I always found him an interesting player, because he obviously had that incredible under 15s period, and then when as sixth form rolled round, and pace and power starts to become matched a little bit by those around you. I think he found that transition hard. I could be wrong, but it certainly appeared that way. But then still was given chances by various teams. I think he spent a bit of time with Tigers. He spent a bit of time with Bristol Bears. Spent some time playing American football. I can't remember if he's come back now or not.
I think he's actually back in the States now. I think he went to a JUCO because he went to Coastal Carolina again for the NCAA, and did a couple of years there. And I think he went back to a junior college program. I don't want to, but again, someone can correct me on that. And I think he's intending to have another crack at the draft if he can. So, but again, was exciting. One I would mention would be Jude Williams, who just pulled again. Caterham not normally kind of can be a top end, and wasn't actually on a radar. Had actually been released by Academy, but kind of on his own. He had a good team around him, not on his own, but pulled that Caterham team. After I'd gone to being really competitive, and also then from that kind of forced his way into England camps without being at an academy. That's always really impressive. I think when you see somebody that says unattached, and then from that got a contract at Wasp. So as a schoolboy, like he was, and again, but again, you could argue played actually quite a bit at 15 as well. So I'm gonna say I'd probably Wakathoke, Arundel, and then I don't know, or Ibitoye maybe. And then and I think I'm going to make you make the final decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I might lean towards Ibitoye. The trouble is, what I'm remembering is this spectacular try he scored for England under-20, which is kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about. But he was an extraordinary player. I think like all of those guys, he got used at 13 quite often because naturally you want to get people's hands on the ball, so you bring them in a bit. Which way do we lean?
I mean, that Trinity side was the best. I mean, until this group, I think it would. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that would be the most successful Trinity first 15 for a long time until this current group. They were. Up until that point, they had been a school that was not really on the school's rugby radar, if that makes sense. And like always kind of, Wickey very much dominant there, and now that's power, balance and power is definitely changing, if not changed. And that year group sort of began that in a way. I think in terms of what we say, him and maybe Wakathoke, that St. Joe's team, getting them over the line, winning that. But it's tough.
Tricky one. Both two good players. I'm going to go with Ibitoye. I'm going to go with him. He was very exciting. I really hope we start to see more of him again at a professional level, because I still think that excitement has room in the professional game. Well, let's put it this way: Wakathoke's managing to get game time up at Newcastle Falcons, and he's a similarly exciting jack in the box kind of a player. There's definitely room for it. I just hope someone finds the space to give him that. Tough. And Diego Bailey as well. We could go on. There's
a lot of good players who missed out there. But I think you're right. And again, it would be nice to see. There's always other things that what's going on. But again, I think the game has now gone to a point where there's room for a time, probably when he came through, the game was very conservative and at the professional level, and maybe now it is opening up more. Although again, I was hoping Cassis was going to get, and then when I saw Josh Bassett sign, I was like, oh no, get Cassis in the team. But there we go. That's my personal bias. But there we go.
Right. No. When two teams worth of players suddenly become available, it
gets harder for the young guys
and occur to others.
But
okay, so that's our two wingers: Cassius Cleves, wearing 11 from Wellington College, and Gabriel Ibitoye from Trinity, wearing 14. Or we can switch it. I mean, they will switch around in game anyway. Which leaves us with just the fullback to go next week, and that is another position where the options are quite ridiculous. There'll be a few guys that were in today's conversation that put their hand up in the fullback as well. It's gonna be interesting. But that is that for today. Dan, thank you so much. I think we've gone on and on, but we've covered what I think are some really important topics as well as some quite good fun ones. And we will be back next week around about the same time. Make sure to give us a subscribe and a follow and all that kind of stuff. Apparently it's all very useful stuff. So it's at NextGen15 on Instagram, Twitter, etc. And you can listen and subscribe and rate and review and all the rest of it at Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can watch us if you are that mad on YouTube. Dan, thanks very much. Good stuff.
Pleasure, mate. And looking forward to having some games to discuss and hopefully some upsets. I'm sure we can prove wrong on who we think is going to win. But yeah, it'd be fun. Looking forward to it.
Who knows how long we'll go on when there's actual games to discuss. My God, it'd be interesting. But good stuff. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening, and we will see you next week.